Yeah, against this right back, Charlie.
There's always just that active red line defending. I think it's like.
People deluded, I'm back again.
Come on, Ian. As Ian Wright just said, there are people deluded. I'm back again. Special guest settings with it being Chelsea versus Arsenal. How you doing, my friend? Are you good? Are you safe? Are you well?
I'm very good. Thank you very much for having me on, mate. How are you?
I'm sweet, man. As I said, this is someone I've wanted to get on the show for a while. Obviously, before we crack on, because I know you're pressed for time, let people know who you are and actually about your YouTube channel and the great content you actually do in terms of writing articles and whatnot, my friend.
Thank you very much. It's a very flattering start to the event. I like it. Continue this way. I'm Kaya Kaynak. I'm the chief Arsenal writer at football.london. You can follow me on Twitter at Kaya Kaynak97. Yeah, I've got a YouTube channel, Kaya Kaynak. So I'm doing that. All my articles on the Football London website. And yeah, follow me on Twitter, Kaya Kaynak97. Also on Facebook, Kaya Kaynak. And Instagram, Kaya Kaynak FL. Bring you all the Arsenal news that I can. Hopefully you guys enjoy it as much as possible.
Come on, people. So, yeah, by the time you lot watch this video and things, all you have to do is click his name in the title to sign up to his YouTube vid. And in the description, all the necessary platforms will be there. Let's get straight into it, man. Chelsea, Arsenal. What comes to mind when I say that to you?
Oof. It comes to mind, to be honest, having been an Arsenal fan before I started covering Arsenal, is a lot of bad memories from early when I was young. But more recently, it's good memories. And I think, especially going to Stamford Bridge, Arsenal have a really, really good record there in recent seasons under Mikel Arteta. And the most recent memory, of course, there was that 3-1 game at the Emirates, but the more memorable memory for me, at least, was the one at Stamford Bridge last season, which I felt was the first time Arsenal went into a game against a big six opponent. And yes, Chelsea aren't what they were, and we all know all those caveats, but it was the first time they went into a game like that and they properly dominated them. And yeah, it was just a sign of what was to come at that start of the season, where we sort of started to believe, wow, this is really an Arsenal team that could challenge for the Premier League title. For the first time, we started to believe that at Stamford Bridge, I think, last season. And I'm hoping that we'll get another similar result again this Saturday.
Again, as you said, we've been amazing generally against Chelsea. Away from home, that's been our training pitch. Hopefully, we don't allow them to obviously get 3 points. How do you feel about and before I get onto that, actually, I share your opinion because I always say that in my videos. I think when I look back to last season, of course, there's plenty of performances, but Stamford Bridge away, I think that was our most complete. In a good way, it was boring in that there wasn't really anything to waffle about with the opponent. I think, ironically, Kai Havertz could have squared it for Aubameyang early on, but beyond that, we completely dominated the performance. How have you felt under Mikel Arteta so far in his reign against the traditional top six? Because we've been doing all right, surely.
Yeah, Agent Kai did a solid last season, didn't he? He knew he was coming. It was all part of the plan.
Yeah, let's run with that one, man.
Exactly. Arteta's record against the big six. Obviously, when he first started, those wins against some of the big six. I remember that first win against Man U. I think it was his third game. It bought him a lot of time. And those FA Cup wins against City and Chelsea, they bought him a lot of time when things didn't go quite so well during the lockdown. And we all remember those dark periods where Arsenal were battling towards the relegation zone. It was a dark time, but it's improved since then. And I think that for me, what Arteta's been really good at is, riding the emotion of those big games and been able to charge his team up that way. For example, in North London derby victories, the win at Old Trafford, those kind of things. But also, more recently, what Arsenal have been done, you referenced it there in your assessment of last season's performance at Stamford Bridge. He's been able to make them a little bit more boring, the big games, but also
more professional performances.
More professional, exactly, is a perfect way of describing it. I think Manchester City, lots of people described it as a not very entertaining game. I think from an Arsenal perspective, it was as good as you're likely to see in a long period of time, because Arsenal have gone from a side that would challenge the big six in big games and, they'd give their all, but they'd always come up short, to now a side that gets over the line. Yeah, they get the 3 points, exactly. And there's very few teams you go into matches now as an Arsenal fan or an Arsenal journalist thinking that they need to be worried about losing. And that's a massive transition from when Mikel Arteta took over, and Arsenal's record against the big six under Unai Emery was atrocious. They barely won any games. So, yeah, it's been a massive turnaround and a massive change of mentality as well from Arteta.
Speaking of change of mentality, kind of putting Chelsea, Arsenal on pause for a sec. Do you think the Manchester City game was a start of a new era? Now, I want to be wary because I think it's like, if it was a football match, it's like 12-1 on aggregate. They beat us the last 12 times. So we need to be wary. But I do, quote unquote, think it kind of will be. I want to be wary of drawing conclusions. But at least for the players, there's genuine. In fact, it's not really true because we have competed against Man City, but getting over the line, getting 3 points, surely the pennies drop that we actually can do this. We can get over that mental barrier and maybe kind of challenge them from a league title, which you alluded to earlier. So do you think it's kind of a mark of a quote unquote new era or things along those lines?
Yeah, I think Man City were the last big hurdle that Arsenal had to overcome. They'd won away at Stamford Bridge, they'd won away at Spurs, they'd won away at Old Trafford, they'd beaten all those teams at home, they'd beaten Liverpool at home, they'd gone to Anfield and put in a really good performance and nearly come away with the result. But in those head-to-heads against Manchester City last season, when it came down to it, Arsenal were found lacking. That game at the Etihad in particular was...
Oh, don't remind me, man.
...of the season. Yeah, listen, it's horrible to even think about, but it was their worst performance of the season at the worst possible moment of the season. And now they go into these sort of games thinking, well, if we play our best football and if we play the way Mikel Arteta has sent us out to play, and Manchester City play their best football, and I don't think Man City were at their best, but I think they played pretty well at the Emirates. If both those teams play to their best, Arsenal will be confident still that they can come out on top, which, if you think about where they were even at the start of last season, like not that long ago, that would have been sort of a fantasy for anyone to think about. Exactly. And how quickly that's changed, how quickly that's turned on its head is really impressive from Arsenal. And so I wouldn't say it's necessarily the start of a new era because they were getting there, but I'd definitely say it's the final hurdle I think they had to jump. Yes, they beat Man City in the Community Shield. It was on penalties. It's a friendly game, whatever. As much as Arteta calls it a final, we all know it doesn't really count. But beating him in the league in a game that really matters with the world watching, the final game before the international break, really hardly fought. No emotion, just sensible professional performance.
Calculated performance, yeah.
Exactly. It's the kind of thing that gives you the confidence going into those future big games. That like, no, we can do this. And when Arsenal got into the title race last season, in the backstretch, it felt like they didn't think they could. It felt like sort of they realised, oh my God, we're top of the league with 5 games to go, and they panicked.
This is really happening, yeah. Exactly. We're kind of overruled by the occasion.
Exactly. And now, I think if they come into that position again, they can start to think, wow, okay, we've done this against Man City by keeping calm. So let's keep calm. Let's act like we've been here before. And let's just...
Amen.
Let's just go through until the very end. And hopefully that's the kind of mental change that Arsenal needed to get over the line this time around.
I mean, one thing I'll give Arsenal is I think they've learned from mistakes. I look back to that year where I think similar to what you just said, the last furlong, I think when we came 5th, we was challenging Spurs at the last sort of lap. And between the Spurs game and the Newcastle one, it didn't happen, did it? The next year we went and got top 4. Last year, obviously, we let ourselves down. Hopefully, we've learned from that. Obviously, you're a journalist, and I'm pretty sure you would have done your research. What can we expect from Chelsea, or what do you expect from Chelsea? How they'll set up, Pochettino, etc. So
I don't think this is quite the walk in the park that lots of people expect it to be from an Arsenal perspective. Yeah, I think Chelsea are kind of a sleeping giant in a way that you've got to be wary of them. Yes, they've got all the things that have gone against them in the sense that they had one of their worst ever seasons last season. Things haven't quite started very well this season, but Pochettino is a really good manager. He did a fantastic job at Spurs, as much as, we're on an Arsenal show and we hate to talk about Spurs positively. He did do a really good job there, and he did a decent job at PSG as well. And he's the kind of coach who is exactly what they needed in terms of bringing that calmness, because there's all that madness going on upstairs with Todd Bowley and Riley. Exactly. And they're signing about 15 players a window, and they're selling this many players as well. And it's all crazy. But you have someone who's there who can steady the ship, and Poch has done that. And he's ridden out that tough start to the season really well. And just before the international break, they were starting to get a bit of momentum going. Sterling was looking pretty good. Cole Palmer was looking pretty good. Jackson just about starting to score a few goals. That midfield of Fernandes, Caicedo, as much as everyone laughs at the price tags, they cost that much for a reason, because they are really good players. And if you look at the Chelsea, and you look at the Chelsea defence, there are weak points there. And if Reece James isn't fit, it could be Marc Cucurella at right back, which Arsenal will fancy their chances against. But at the same time, there are still some really good defenders. Thiago Silva, even at 38, is a really good player. Disasi's a good player. Their goalie is decent, Robert Sanchez. So they're not a team that you can easily write off. I think Arsenal will go there expecting a physical game, because if you look at that Chelsea midfield with Gallagher in there alongside Fernandes and Caicedo, there's a lot of legs there. Facts. So they'll maybe be looking to sort of draw Chelsea in and play over the press, a bit similar to what they did against Man City. But Mikel Arteta will have a plan. He has a plan for every single game, and I'm sure that he'll have something up his sleeve to go to Stamford Bridge and hopefully get a result.
I hope he's got a plan, because I know us Arsenal fans were probably our heads are probably still in the clouds after beating Manchester City. But once that result was finished, or come 90 minutes, Mikel Arteta was probably in game mode essentially, and beating City counts for nothing if we go and undo our hard work against Chelsea. And I know obviously Chelsea are probably not in with a shout of what Arsenal, Liverpool, City are in with a shout, but it's a traditional top 6 game. These games are almost 6-pointers. That's why I was actually quite happy to beat Manchester City beyond the obvious, because obviously we dropped points against Spurs and Fulham. Manchester City are not going to drop too many points, so I'm happy we kind of clawed that back. And you look at Chelsea, I think you made a great point. I think when I looked, they're out of the last 9 points available, they've taken 7. I think they're actually up there in the league for clean sheets. So, form is temporary, class is essentially permanent. As you said, they've got a bunch of quality players. They've got a quality manager, which I'm sure Arteta and Poch, if I remember correctly, cross paths at PSG. So they probably know each other's game plan, or how they kind of tick, quote unquote. So, yeah, I mean, we can't talk about Chelsea, Arsenal and not discuss Kai Havertz. I know we mentioned his name lightly, but what have you made of him in an Arsenal shirt? Did his signing surprise you? And what would you, not that you can obviously answer because you're not Arteta, but what did you think the reasoning behind him was? Because I think everyone could see Rice improves us, Raya improves us, Timber improves us. Speaking for myself, where I looked at Kai Havertz, it was more of a thing where I believe in you, Arteta, so I'm trusting the method to the madness sort of approach, but I can't see light at the end of the tunnel necessarily at the moment.
Yeah, I think if you look at how Havertz has played at Chelsea as a false 9 over the past few seasons, generally playing in those attacking positions, it didn't appear to make that much sense, in the sense that Arsenal were already pretty stacked in that position. Obviously, Saka, Martinelli, Jesus pretty much have the front 3 on lock, and then Eddie Nketiah's just been given a contract extension. Trossard's been doing really well. Reece Nelson been given a contract extension. All those kind of things. Fabio Vieira obviously can play on the wing. Smith Rowe. There's lots of depth up front. But when you started to sort of unpick it a bit and peel back the layers of what Arteta was trying to do with this transfer, and it was really revealing that when he signed, in the interview on Arsenal.com, Arteta said Havertz is going to bring us a lot of versatility, but he's also going to bring us a lot of strength and depth to our midfield. And that's clearly been the plan. And it does on paper make sense, because if you look at the runs Granit Xhaka was making in that sort of left-8 role last season, a lot of them were third-man runs, late runs into the box, sort of a la Aaron Ramsey type things. And Xhaka got 9 goals, which is really impressive. It's the best he's got in his entire career. And he
couldn't believe it last year.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was shocking, but the way he turned it around and the way he really sort of threw himself at that role was really impressive. But I think we all knew deep down in our heart of hearts, as much as we love Granit Xhaka, there is more there, that we left a bit on the table in terms of those final third actions. And there's more goals to be scored. And the way Arsenal play, they do create chances for their third man runners. So the way Havertz was getting all his goals at Bayer Leverkusen generally were those late runs, those late arrivals into the box. And it kind of made sense on paper. Unfortunately, we've not seen it yet. It's not really transpired that way. There have been a few of those late runs. I think back to Man United, where he spurned a really good chance. That came from a sort of third-man run. There's been a couple. There's one against Lons as well. We had a really good volleyed chance, and it was actually quite well saved by Samba. Yeah. However, those are only 2 that I can think of at the top of my head, and that's not enough. And yes, he's been in and out of the team, and it probably spoke volumes that Arsenal invested £65 million in the guy, and he wasn't in their starting 11 for the biggest game of the season. So I don't think it's quite gone as well as he would have hoped, and he obviously would have wanted more than 1 goal, and that goal coming from the penalty spot is not as impressive as he would have been hoping for. But there is a plan with him, and I think maybe people get a bit too wedded to the idea that, oh, he's going to be this or he's going to be that. I think Arteta views him as someone who can plug into lots of different positions, and that versatility and that quality in various different positions means that he's a very useful asset to the squad. Yes, 65 million is a lot to pay for someone who's going to be a sort of a Swiss Army knife type player.
Rebuilding our midfield as well to go with Declan Rice.
Exactly. So it was a lot of money, and I think that's where most people have the issue. I think everyone understands Kai Havertz is a really good player, and obviously Chelsea coming to Arsenal is going to be difficult. But I don't think Arsenal fans are too sort of snobby about that. I mean, look at how well they've accepted Jorginho. I think that's a prime example. Yeah. I think it's just that price tag, which is, I think most people would say Arsenal, as it stands, look like they've overpaid for Kai Havertz. But if he can start scoring goals in these big games, if he can start scoring goals across the next round of matches, I'm sure people will forget about that very quickly. And I'm sure we'll be having these conversations saying, oh, do you remember when Kai Havertz had a bad start at Arsenal? Yeah. So fingers crossed he can get it together, because there's a lot of goodwill from the fans and from the people inside the club for him to succeed.
Nice to see him his name being charted as well, speaking of your goodwill comment.
It's a really good chart. So I'm hoping the away fans bring it out again at Stamford Bridge. Yeah, exactly. But he has shown flashes of quality. Against Man City, it was him who got the assist for Martinelli's goal. So he's a player who can deliver in big moments. He's shown that, winner in the Champions League final. So, there's a quality player in there. It's just up to Mikel Arteta to find that way of unlocking it. And I think he's onto something. And I think Arteta's earned sort of enough credit in the bank with the way he's managed Arsenal and made a few controversial decisions over the past couple of years. All of them have paid off. So I think he's got enough credit in the bank for us to all sort of bite our tongues a little bit when it comes to Havertz. Although, we do need to see a little bit more, I think, from him going forward.
I mean, you said it there. There's credit in the bank. Mikel Arteta has made a lot of, for me, unpopular decisions at times. And I mean, for a manager that wants to get our club back to where we need to, of course, you're going to do that. And I think they have worked in hindsight. That's where I said, you know what, I don't blindlessly follow anyone. But if I'm going to trust anyone, it's going to be Mikel Arteta. As much as I think he's a miracle worker, though, he isn't a miracle worker per se. So I need to see a bit more from Havertz. And while I agree with your point of echoing what Arteta said about versatility, we've had many players, in my opinion, that can play everywhere, but they're not necessarily good. Now, when I look at Timber, who's unfortunately injured, Tomiyasu, Benjamin White, bit different, but Declan Rice in terms of he can play as an 8 or a 6. I guess Thomas Partey because he played unorganically right back. I like the fact that these are multifunctional players who can actually play in these roles. Fabio Vieira and Smith Rowe, another one. I just think with Havertz, you're arguably a jack of all trades, master of none, and you need to fill the void that Xhaka has left. And as much as I like Xhaka and I'm sad to see him go, and I think we should have brought in someone else different from Havertz and kept Xhaka. Obviously, that didn't happen. I don't feel Xhaka is a player that we should be waffling about and singing from the high heavens. I think it's more damning on what we did or didn't do in the market than Xhaka's ability necessarily. So I'm prepared to give Havertz a chance, but I just feel the more we're getting good as a club and the more there's pressure for spots, the more we need to see. On the topic of pressure for spots, I'm sure you've covered it online. David Raya and Aaron Ramsdale. Aaron Ramsdale's come out and spoken today. Where are you at with that? Do you think Aaron Ramsdale could actually depart in the summer? Because surely it can't persist like this. Two very good goalies, as much as we like it.
Yeah, as much as Mikel Arteta wants to say that it's like any other position and he's going to rotate it like any other position and he wants to make changes mid-game, it can't be done. You can't. It's a tricky one because in an ideal world, you'd maybe give Ramsdale those Champions League matches that are coming up. But because Arsenal lost at Lens, those games are now really important against Seville and you can't afford to lose them. So I think it will be David Raya playing those games. I think the only game that Aaron Ramsdale is likely to get between now and the next international break in November, barring injury or a terrible loss of form for David Raya, is that West Ham game in the Carabao Cup. So he's got a lot to prove in those matches. And I feel sorry for him in the sense that he hasn't really done anything wrong. And he played well in those first 4 games of the season before the first international break. He did very little wrong, very little to deserve being dropped. But when you see what David Raya does bring to the team in terms of that composure against Man City, it didn't always go to plan, but he stuck with it. And he didn't choose to always go long. He tried to keep the ball on the floor. He tried to play.
There,
exactly. And that composure in those sort of high stress situations can be very difficult. And I think that's why maybe Mikel Arteta has sort of veered towards David Raya over Aaron Ramsdale in these past few games. I don't think it's necessarily a case of Ramsdale being a goalkeeper who's not competent or not qualified to be Arsenal's number one. I think it's just he feels that there's a slight edge that David Raya has in those big games that I think makes a huge difference. And listen, Raya's not been perfect. He's made his mistakes. I referenced the Man City game where I didn't think he had the best of games, even though Arteta did. He made a mistake against Lens, but he does have that thing on the ball where he just brings that extra level of composure to the back line. I think
and his starting positioning is a lot higher than Ramsdale's as well. That might be the fine margin Arteta wants, really.
Definitely. All those things that seem minor to us are massive to Mikel Arteta. And
make the major differences, yeah.
Exactly. Those inches make a huge difference across the course of the season. And Ramsdale's comments today, obviously coming out and saying he's been hurt by it, I thought they were fine. I wouldn't have expected him to say anything different. You're not expecting him to come out and say, yeah, I love being Arsenal's number 2. It's great sitting on the bench all the time. You expect him to come out.
He's a liar, yeah. You would be a liar.
Exactly. So it sounds like him and Raya are both sort of getting on professionally and sort of getting on with the job and accepting of the situation. It's not created a toxic atmosphere yet. So I think that's a good thing. I think they're 2 great characters, 2 great professionals, and they're going to battle it out. And as much as Arsenal fans love Aaron Ramsdale and are sad to see him out of the team, yeah, I do think come next summer there'll be a decision to be made because you're right, it can't continue like this. I'm hesitant to make a definitive statement now just because you don't know what will happen across the course of the season. Yeah. Raya could drop a few clangers and, he's never played in these big games. Ramsdale has played in a few, but Raya prior to Manchester City, that was probably the biggest game of his career. So he has to come through those tests and he has to prove himself. But yeah, it's looking tricky. I wouldn't be too surprised if Ramsdale does depart, if the situation stays the way it is, but things can change across the course of the season. They happen all the time.
Like I feel sorry for Ramsdale because he just got a new deal not too long ago, which from a club point of view, if they were always planning to bring in Raya, I like it because it shows that we're thinking. And you mentioned it there with fine margins. I think personally, Arsenal fans have to get comfortable with these unpopular decisions. I don't want to say it, but Smith Rowe's days potentially could be numbered. We all know Kieran Tierney's days were numbered. Aubameyang was a bit different because it was more discipline issues, but his days were numbered. And as we're chasing those fine margins, difficult decisions have to be made. For instance, I love Benjamin White. I think he's a fantastic player. But had Timber have been fit with the way he started, some of the things we're saying about Ramsdale and Raya loosely, that could have affected Benjamin White or even Zinchenko on the left-hand side. So I think we have to get comfortable. I will say, Arteta undoubtedly has made mistakes and will make mistakes again. He's human, but I think he's got the club's best interest in heart. And I think he knows there's an element of pressure. Money's being spent. As a club, we're a lot healthier now. You don't really see, people clamoring for the Kroenkes out and stuff. So I think there's a method to his madness. I did want to ask you kind of to wrap this up, kind of three kind of questions because I know you're kind of pressed for time. The first would be Saka, Saliba and Partey in relation to their fitness update. I know Arteta is going to shed light on Friday, but at this moment, what would you say on those?
I think shedding light is generous to what Mikel Arteta will give us in the press conference tomorrow. I think we'll get very little going into the Chelsea game. Thomas Partey, it's my understanding that he's pretty fit. He should be okay. Whether he's available whether he'll be chosen, to start ahead of Jorginho after Jorginho played really well against Man City, I think that'll be a selection decision. William Saliba, his issue was a minor one, is what I was told when he pulled out of the France squad. It's something that has been ongoing for a little while, and they've been managing it reportedly with pain injections. I've seen those stories. I haven't been able to confirm them myself, but I think it was a minor one. And I think with the strength and depth France have at the centre back position, I didn't think they wanted to take any risks with him over the international break.
In the Euros year as well, yeah.
Exactly. And they hadn't necessarily qualified, and they had a game against Holland, which was going to be difficult. So they had a lot of big things coming up, and they just chose not to risk it. Saka, again, it was my understanding it was a minor injury that he picks up in Lens. But, I don't think Mikel Arteta will give anything away in terms of whether he's fit. I think maybe Arsenal will play a few games of smoke and mirrors with us where he probably won't be included in any training photos or anything that are released across the next few days, and all those kind of things that make things very difficult to predict what kind of lineup. We all know them as people who are sort of present online when it comes to covering Arsenal. We all know how this works in terms of the build-up. But hopefully Saka could be in contention. But like I say, it was a small injury. Whether Arsenal want to risk him, they chose not to risk him against Man City. Whether they choose to risk him now, if it indeed is a risk, I think we'll have to wait and see on that one. But again, none of those three are massive issues. Hopefully they'll all be back fully fit relatively soon.
What do you make of Partey then? Because I think he got 45 minutes for Ghana, and the physio went away with him, as he has done on a couple of occasions.
Yeah, I think him coming back into the team as a defensive midfielder, as a 6, will be really good for Arsenal. I didn't like the Thomas Partey at right back experiment. I thought it was forced by maybe Zinchenko being absent, so he wanted to try and recreate what Zinchenko does, inverting on the left by bringing Partey in on the right. And they're two very similar players in terms of their technical capabilities and their ability to receive the ball under pressure. But I just don't think it worked, and I think you lost a lot more than you gained by having him there. Yeah. So I hope if Partey is fit, and I expect him to be fit for Saturday, I hope that he's brought back into the central midfield position. And that midfield that finished the game against Man City, Partey, Rice, Odegaard, for me, is the midfield I would choose at Stamford Bridge. I just think it makes the most sense. And it's a midfield that played in the Community Shield. It works really well in the Community Shield. It's got balance, it's got physicality, it's got technicality. It's got everything. Exactly. It's got the perfect blend of what you want from the Arsenal midfield. And I just think as a trio, it's a really good balance. And I think they would be able to dominate that Chelsea midfield. So hopefully Thomas Partey is available. It's my understanding that he's fit. So, fingers crossed he will be.
What have you made of January? Because we're still linked with Ivan Toney and Pedro Neto. Whether we'll get them or pay the asking price is another thing. Are you optimistic or pessimistic? Do you think there's anything necessarily to read? Obviously, I know you're not obviously working at Arsenal. You don't know. Nobody knows what the hell they're going to do. But in your expert opinion, per se, do you buy the Pedro Neto and Ivan Toney stuff, per se?
They definitely have wanted to add a forward for some time now to the ranks. Reece Nelson's contract was extended in the summer and Kaya Havertz was brought in, but a forward player is something that there's definitely scope for in the squad to add. What kind of forward remains to be seen. They're open to all sorts of possibilities. So I don't think if they were to go out and buy players in January, I don't think it would be Toney and Neto. I think it would be one or the other. And Arteta has generally shown a preference for versatility across the front line. that would lean me more towards Pedro Neto. And it's my understanding that Arsenal would definitely, have interest in those players, and they've watched them in the past. But whether they will necessarily go for them in January, I think, how do I put this? It's a difficult one because they're not necessarily struggling financially, but they did invest a lot this summer.
You have to tread carefully, yeah.
Exactly. So you can't necessarily go out and start spending crazy amounts of money without bringing much in. And Arsenal didn't bring as much in terms of sales as they were hoping for in the summer. So
Balogun, the only significant one per se.
Exactly. They would have been hoping for a permanent deal for Tierney, for a Lokonga, for a Nicola Pepe. None of those materialised. And Nuno Tavares is another one. And none of those materialised. And with the way it turned out, I think Arsenal will have to just keep that in mind when it comes to the finances. I think they'll probably feel that as things stand, they have a squad that's capable of lasting, until the end of the season and competing for the title, because they do have a squad that's capable of competing for the title, in my opinion. But of course, there's always scope for an extra quality player. And if you look at that position, the positions in the squad where Arsenal could maybe do with a bit of backup, they've addressed the defensive backup by signing Timber. Yes, Timber's injured, but when he comes back, that position is solid. Declan Rice has come in to mean that Arsenal's midfield is stronger than it's ever been.
He's gone up several levels with his addition.
Exactly. Trossard came in to provide cover for Martinelli. The one position where you start to think maybe they could add a little bit more is that right wing position behind Kaya Saka. Yeah, you could argue they could go for a different type of striker to Gabriel Jesus, but I think those two areas, and Saka back up in particular. Listen, it's very difficult to get a Saka back up because it's a very
someone
difficult
that's happy
sell.
to do it. Yeah,
exactly. It's a very difficult sell to go to a player. Look, we've got this Ballon d'Or nominee in the squad who is 22 years old, homegrown boy, going to play every single game. But do you want to come and be his understudy? Exactly. It's a very difficult sell. So it's not as easy as just saying, here's 70 million on the table for Pedro Neto. He's our Arsenal. He's Bukayo Saka's backup. In reality, it's a very difficult deal to get done. So we'll have to see. Things always start moving a little bit closer to January. It is very early on that front, but maybe we'll get together again in January and we'll discuss it.
We definitely will, man. My last question for you before I let you shoot off. Obviously, if I say to you, Martin Odegaard, Saliba, Saka, Martinelli, who has the highest ceiling?
Ooh.
Difficult one. I know it's one that I ponder all the time.
It's a fair question. I think William Saliba has the potential to be the best centre back of Arsenal's Premier League era.
I think he'll be at Real Madrid soon one day. I think that's that level of player.
I think of that trio you've mentioned, he's probably the most likely to maybe move on one day. Martinelli seems very happy at Arsenal. Odegaard has done that thing before already in his career, and Saliba maybe hasn't done it so much, but he has just signed a 4-year deal. So he's here for the short term. And I think
we need 100 million for him, Real Madrid, if you're listening.
At least, maybe 200. Why not?
Yeah, literally.
There's very few players who can replicate what Saliba does in terms of, you can't dribble past him because he's too quick. You can't get the ball off him because he's too technically secure. You can't sort of body him, as Haaland found out, because he's too strong. He's got all the attributes that you need to become the best central defender in the world. I just think, concentration sometimes, very rarely, but sometimes is a little issue
off the ball as well.
Because sometimes it almost seems like he's playing the game on easy mode, and it's just too easy for him. But that's going to come with experience. That's something that only gets better with playing games, and he's playing more of these big games, and he never ever seems phased. He's come up against the best centre forward in the world, in my opinion, Erling Haaland, and kept him quiet not once but twice. Yeah, that's not easy to do. There's very few players in the world who can do that. Exactly. So yeah, I'd probably say William Saliba. But listen, I think Martin Odegaard is probably, with De Bruyne out injured, the best attacking midfielder in the league, and Martinelli is up there with the best forwards in the Premier League. So very good players in their own rights also.
It's one that I can't answer because I always change. I think it could be Odegaard. I almost think Odegaard's ceiling is kind of underrated internally within Arsenal fans. Saka is Saka. You could arguably say he's top 3, top 5 in his position already. As you said earlier, Ballon d'Or nominee. Saliba, we struck gold, man. One of the best 20-odd million we've ever spent. And I think he's on his way to being that. But now I'm starting to think Martinelli. And I say Martinelli because for me, he's got that Cristiano Ronaldo thing about him. Definitely not ability for those listening. Just that hunger. And I just think, I'm not saying the other 3 don't have that hunger, but just that want to be better and push yourself. Sometimes that can exceed expectations. So I don't have a clue, man, but I'm happy that they all signed new deals, unlike previous years where these contracts have ran into the season, we ain't been in trouble. So I'm cool, man. And I'm happy to be proven right or wrong with any of those 4 players. But I know you're pressed for time, man. So I appreciate you for tuning in and offering your sense and everything, Arsenal. Before I let you get out of here, plug your stuff again, my guy.
Absolute pleasure to be on. Thank you very much. I'm glad we've finally been able to make it happen.
Finally.
On Twitter, yeah, like I said at the start, Kaya Kaynak 97. Facebook is Kaya Kaynak. Instagram, Kaya Kaynak FL. And I believe the YouTube channel, I lose track of all the names, is Kaya Kaynak FL as well. If not, it's Kaya Kaynak 97, in fact, sorry. So, yeah, give me a follow, subscribe, a like, whatever you want on any of them. And, of course, you can find all my stuff on the Football.London website. That's where I put all my articles out.
So you heard it from the horse's mouth, people. Go and follow on all the socials. Please make sure you're commenting, subscribing, and letting us know your thoughts across all of the media platforms. Let me let you get out of here, my guy. It's been a fantastic chat, and we'll link up again soon, man. Take care of yourself, my dude.
Cheers.
Safe.
There's always just that active red flag, defending. I think it's like.